Information fueled.
Opinion driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
7:07 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on in to your Thursday, January 23rd. My name is Dan Mandis, along with Joan Jones and Jeff Malinoff. KGB is producing, and Scott Cepicky, state rep from the 64th District here in the great state of Tennessee, is with us. And Scott, always appreciate having you on. I always hate the circumstances, typically, when we have to have you on because, of course, we all know what happened yesterday with the shooting at Antioch High School. Scott, last year, after Covenant, there was a lot of legislation that was voted on, and a lot of it was regarding the safety of our schools here in Tennessee. And there's a lot of funding. The legislation allocated for $230 million for school safety enhancements, and there's a lot of enhancements that need to happen with our schools to protect our kids. How quickly are those enhancements able to get done? I don't know what exactly was done at Antioch High School, but generally speaking, where are we in that process?
Well, Dan, first of all, I want to say I'm very sorry for the tragedy yesterday, and our heartfelt prayers and wishes go out to those families. But to answer your question, we started this process, like you said, over a year ago. I can tell you, Dan, the schools from my district have already received the bullet-resistant film that's in place, metal detectors, enhancements to campus security like gates and fencing. It is a real-time thing that's been done in a time of trying to get it done as quick as we can. And I think that what we're seeing is this is just a continued effort with all of the thousands of schools that we have across the state of Tennessee to secure them from external intrusion. Yeah,
one of the things that folks are saying is that Antioch High School, there wasn't any metal detectors, there's no weapons detections systems. Is that part of the safety package that was passed last year?
If you'll give me a little latitude, I'll try to explain the whole process, if that's okay.
Okay.
So first of all, we passed a bill to supply a Homeland Security agent provided by the state to every county. And one of the first jobs of that Homeland Security agent was to do a school security assessment on all private and public schools and give those recommendations to the LEA or the school districts or the private schools so that they could take those assessments and provide them to the state for funding to meet those assessment needs. Now, the first question we have to ask, Dan, especially with Antioch now, is what was that assessment? What did it say? And what did Metro Nashville facilitate those upgrades in that school to make sure that those areas were secure? That's one of the first things we got to get, Dan, is information. So that's the one thing that I'm looking at is, okay, what was the school safety assessment? The second thing was we provided money, and you know this because we had an issue with Metro Nashville about not wanting to participate in the SRO program. We provided an SRO at state funding for every public and private school across the state. So we want to know to make sure that they were taking advantage of those resources. And then lastly, Dan, we provided over $200 million for mental health of our students and our people in Tennessee. And we want to make sure that all of our school districts are pulling down those funds to help with social workers and crisis intervention teams for that when they identify a student or an individual who's in crisis to get them the necessary help. So there's a lot of questions that need to get answered before we start jumping to solutions and conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, what happened, and my big question whenever these things happen is the mental health aspect. And I don't want to get into what I said earlier in the program. People have heard it, but the mental health aspects of this and what kind of psychotropic drugs had this kid perhaps been on. We don't know. There's a lot that we don't know. There's a 300-page manifesto, whatever. But the bottom line is I remember speaking to you about this last year, Scott Cepicky, where, I mean, I lost my ever-loving mind when we were talking about Metro Nashville, not wanting to participate in this because if I remember right, they didn't want to participate because, people like Justin Jones and so forth, they wanted to focus exclusively on the gun. And they didn't want to talk about any kind of safety improvements, building fortification, SROs, none of that, because they wanted to focus on the gun. I don't even, remind me, did he vote for House Bill 322?
No, it did not.
I remember this. I remember this like it was yesterday, because this was, with all the protests and all of that stuff that was going on. You had the Justins and Gloria Johnson and all these folks, and they voted against these clear common sense solutions, and whether or not it's all been executed or not is up for debate. We got to find out all those questions. But I guess go ahead.
When we were going through this process, Dan, all of the experts told us is you've got to prevent intrusion into the building. And so on the school safety assessments and the school safety grants that we were going to supply this money from to protect our most vulnerable individuals, our students in classrooms and our teachers, was to do everything we can to make sure that the individual does not gain access to the school. Look at the Covenant shooter when she shot out the glass. Remember that? Those videos? Yeah. We did everything we could based off of those safety recommendations by the experts to prevent the intrusion of individuals with guns into our schools. And then if they did get entrance, to make sure that we had individuals in there who were trained to repel those individuals to keep them and keep our students safe.
713.
We had to pass a bill. We had to pass a bill real quick, and I'm going to tell you this. We had to pass a bill to force Metro Nashville to put the SROs into schools.
So that is so irresponsible. That is so. Well, now, there were a couple of SROs, from what I understand, at Antioch High School. They just were not in the area when this was going on. This happened in the cafeteria. And it all goes, Scott, it all goes back to what you said a few moments ago. It's all about the access into the building. And that's what they need to prevent. It's all about fortifying schools. And, unfortunately, right now, if a lot of these schools, I'm assuming that if somebody wants to, walk in, they can. And I think, to me, it is all about fortifying those schools, a focus on mental illness. And yes, I do believe that SROs, they do ultimately make a difference. I'm going to ask you about the current legislative session coming up here. Degrees. All right. So you're currently in session. And Scott Cepicky. So is there anything school safety related that is on the docket, as far as you know, this year?
No, I do not. I know there's been some members wanting to follow up on the school safety resources, making sure that those funds are being taken up from the state, making sure these plans are being implemented, and then doing a follow-up with the Homeland Security agents going behind the work and making sure that things have been put in place that were put on the assessment. I'm sure that some of my colleagues will look at other avenues of trying to prevent the intrusion. I think you're going to see more emphasis, put onto the mental health aspect of it. As we know, when these shootings take place, these individuals, they have crossed a line mentally that they are willing to shoot another individual, and we've got to try to get them as much help as we can ahead of time, and being able to look for the signals and get people trained to look for the signals of someone who's in distress.
Well, there was $8 million allocated for hiring school-based behavioral help staff as well in that House Bill 322 from last year. One of the conversations, and it is our poll up on our YouTube page, should cell phones be banned in schools? Now, I mean, you and I have spoken about this. Remind me, right now there's no official statewide ban. It's by district, correct?
That is correct. Some districts have already taken it from bell to bell, and there's all different plans. There's a bill that Senator Hensley and I are running this year. I think off the top of my head, I think it's House Bill 25, or maybe House Bill 15. And what it does is it requires every district to come up with a policy that during instructional time, cell phones are banned. However, the students during an emergency have to have access to their phones, so it accounts for a tragedy that might happen or a crisis that might happen in school, and it leaves it up to the local school districts to come out on how they want to address those issues. You've seen them, Dan. I think I might have showed them to you. These schools that have these little pockets on the back of the doors that when the kids walk in, they just put their cell phones right there. So during instructional time, they're not in their hands, but if there's an emergency, they can access them really quick at the door.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
But that was a recommendation we got on the education side about the distraction the cell phones are causing, hurting the educational outcomes. But from the Homeland Security agents, they said, hey, it might be a good idea that those phones still stay in the classroom, but in a pocket on the door. So in case of an emergency, the students can access their phones so the parents could have communication with their kids.
All right, Scott Cepicky joining us. Have we missed anything? Or I know you're going to have a far more in-depth conversation with Murphy Show this afternoon. Have we missed anything in the context of this conversation?
No, I think before we start, like I said, before we start jumping to solutions and conclusions, I think we need to continue to gather information and ask questions, and then we can make good decisions going forward on what needs to be done.
All right. Always great to have you on, especially when you're kind enough to give us some time at the last minute like you did today. And as always, thank you very much for joining us on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Scott Cepicky, 64th District. And reminder that Governor Bill Lee will be joining us at 8:35 right here on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Apparently, there's breaking news that I don't know if I would call this breaking news, but
it's breaking.
CNN is laying off a bunch of folks?
Yeah. CNN is laying off 200 people.
Wow.
Eliminating 200 jobs focused on CNN's traditional TV operations. They'll add the same number for new digital roles like data scientists and product engineers. So how about that?
So they're firing the TV people and they're bringing in digital people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I do not. This is a report from the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a subscription to New York Times. I am not afforded a subscription for New York Times, so I really can't tell. What this is all about. But
right.
Yes, and also they're not the only ones. CNN is laying off hundreds. NBC News is also planning layoffs this week.
Okay. Did you hear what's going on with weather people?
No.
TV weather people?
No.
Oh my goodness. It has been all the conversation on Facebook. I don't have time to do it now. Coming up right before the news, Joan and I'm sure it's going to be an engaging and enthralling conversation about local weather people. But they're being fired all across the country. So we're going to talk about, they are. We'll talk, it's one particular company. And it's owned by, this company is owned, it's like Allen Broadcasting. Remember Byron Allen? I forget what TV show he was from.
Yes.
But he owns a bunch of TV networks. And in their infinite wisdom, they've decided to fire all of their weather people across the country. And what they're going to do is they're going to have their weather coming from one location.
Oh, well, that's smart.
So
that's...
how are you going to do that in breaking news situations, breaking weather situations?
Right.
I don't know. I think it's a sad commentary on what's going on with local news, but especially when you look at, when you look at local news, they do polling. I guess we're going to do this now. When you do polling and what people look for local television for, they always talk about the weather. They always talk about the weather.
Yeah.
And now, and they're spinning it like, oh, we're going to be coming from, I think they said the Weather Channel, this sort of like hub. And Weather Channel has all of this, highfalutin, high-tech, gadgetry. And
so they plan to use that?
What they're saying is that the coverage is actually going to be better and not worse because of the laying off of all of the actual weather people.
Of course they're going to say it's better. It's not bad, guys. It's
exactly right.
No, they warn them like, guys, this is going to suck. Yeah. Be ready.
So, I don't know.
I just don't know how you bring you localize the weather using a national system. No, that doesn't work.
Nope.